Getting the party started.
Oh, he got the party started. Except I hadn't started. Well, we'll be fine. I was just thinking I hadn't started recording on my end yet. But that doesn't matter because you recorded on your end. You started the party.
There we go.
Aaron's always starting the party. And today he's actually wearing the wrong merch to go with our episode. What the flip?
Sorry, I don't have anything else to wear.
Neither do I. And multiple... Oh, this is what I'm wearing, though.
Go, nice. I thought that said Billabong at first.
No, this shirt, Godzilla versus Kong, this makes me laugh because it's actually a Carl's Jr. shirt. And
nice.
And I
Even
got
better.
it by ordering a sandwich.
Man, good deal. You should have ordered a bunch of them.
Right? So I was
Clothe
laughing.
your children for the year.
I was laughing because I was like, man, I just went into a fast food restaurant, ordered a burger, like a combo, and came out with a free extra large t-shirt. I'm literally living the American dream.
That is amazing. The American dream in Canada, double bonus.
Exactly. So, no, that's funny. But no, I don't have any. And this whole week, I kept telling myself that we were doing no sleep records for some reason. That's what was in my brain, which we're not. And I didn't prep to do no sleep. So, that's a good thing. I do have correct information for what we are covering. But we're going to talk about pure noise records, which I didn't look this up. But in my brain, I always connected it with pure volume. That can't actually be a thing, right?
I don't think so, but we can just say it did and see what happens.
I mean, that's
just kidding.
That's how we do most of this, but I'm just I don't know why I always connected it. What was this? Oh, interesting.
Just the word pure.
Yeah, so here's something interesting though. Pure Noise Records is an American punk rock record label. Did you know this? Did you know it's an American punk rock record label?
I did.
Based in Berkeley, California. It was founded by Jake Round in 2009 while he was an editor at AMP magazine, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
The previous
I
fall.
used to have a subscription to that.
Yeah, friends of his in the band No Bragging Rights told him they were looking for a new label. So he said, hey, why don't I start a label? Prior to this,
guy.
He had a short stint as an intern at Fat Records.
Nice.
So there you go.
Good basis to start a label, I'd say.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with pure volume, but in my brain, I've always connected the two, and I'm not too sure why. But anyway, welcome to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. My name is David. My friend is Aaron. Good
Hey,
evening.
what's up?
Good
The
day.
party starter. I'm here.
And I am drinking something that is in the pinkest can. Where's
Oh,
my
maybe you're the party starter. I've got a bottle of no-name water. The best kind of party for a guy my age.
I am drinking a lemon berry Hellas. I don't know how to say it. Man, some of the beer names are weird. By Village Squeeze, which is from Calgary, so not too far.
Oh, nice. Keep it local. Keep it flowing.
Yeah, man. It's very summery. It's literally a lemon berry, so it's good time. Good time in a can. But yeah, how are things, man?
Well, I've got some sick seasonal allergies just clogging up my sinuses, so if I sound nasally, then that is partially my normal voice, partially the allergies.
That's all good. I don't have seasonal allergies, but you know what I've been doing? This is, has nothing to do with what we're about to talk about, but have you ever heard of GeoGuessr?
Geocaching?
No. GeoGuessr. I think that's what it's called.
I have no idea what that is.
It's a website. It's an online game basically where the premise is it uses Google Maps, Google Street View, and it drops you in the middle of nowhere, and then you just got to try and guess and figure out where you are by using surrounding clues and whatever.
Huh.
I was just saying I was a little bit late tonight because I was playing it with my son, and we were doing the Canada map, and it dropped us on a dirt road in Alberta, and I was like, man, just scrolling.
That's just a few roads down from where I live.
Scrolling for hours just to try and find any sort of clue, and eventually I just gave up. I said, I'm just going to throw out a guess. I think we're in this area, southern Alberta. And so I threw it, and I ended up being really close. I was like, all right,
sweet.
I know my dirt roads in Alberta. What can I say? Yeah, but no, we're going to talk about a punk rock record label. It's what's going to happen, except there's a few of these bands that I wouldn't consider straight up punk rock.
Yeah.
So why don't we dive into it? What's your first? So actually, before you,
Yeah.
okay, two things. First and foremost, if this is your first time listening, this label series that we've been doing, we're basically picking. We've kind of kept saying top 5, but basically, I think what it boils down to is we're just picking 5 records that we want to talk about that are specifically that were released on a specific label, because we're following up next week with an interview with an artist that is on the label, or was on the label, however you want to put it. And so sometimes they share some picks that we just don't want to double up, sort of thing. So we just pick 5 records each that we want to focus on. So do you remember how you heard about Pure Noise Records?
Well, I was trying to think about that today. I think this label is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's probably the newest label that we've covered so far.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's definitely, I mean, different. You know, as I was looking through our list today, I was like, man, like these are all like such recent releases, you know, even within the last 5-6 years, which is pretty, you know, recent compared to a lot of the labels we're talking about. And so with this label, there wasn't a comp that I heard of. You know, it wasn't floating around in a record store or anything. I think it was probably you know, a band like Counterparts. I'm trying to think. They're probably the band and the label I've been listening to the longest. They were on a different label before this, but, you know, just trying to think of like when I saw bands starting to sign to this label, you know, could have been like even something with like The Story So Far or State Champs or bands like that. So definitely a bit different. It's not, you know, the kind of same iconic label as a lot of ones we've been talking about. But what's really neat about them is, you know, for only being around, you know, 11 years, like their roster is crazy. Like, you know, go through their discography, it's like, man, like it's kind of shocking how many big bands and big, you know, somewhat influential releases have come out on this label already.
Yeah, that was something that I was a little bit blown away by too, is that, I mean, they've only been around for, like you said, 10, 11, 12 years or so. And I think similarly for me, I'm sure I just heard of the label by one day. And I mean, I guess this is how you discover labels a lot of the time, even, you know, back in the day, some of the labels that we've talked about is just by hearing a band, whether it was seeing them live or what have you, and then not necessarily, you know, like immediately connecting them to the label, but eventually just kind of going like, oh wait, there's like a number of these artists and these albums that I really enjoy that are on this label. And so going through, it's funny because we were going to do an episode on Drive-Thru Records. Of course, you interviewed, is it Tim from Alistair? Yeah. And so, I mean, that episode came out a little bit ago now, but we were going to do one where we shared our 5 picks as well. And as we were kind of looking at, you know, like the library of releases, I was just kind of like, I don't know if I could honestly, like following our rules of only 1 per band sort of thing, I don't know if I could honestly pick 5 releases from Drive-Thru that, you know, that we could both like independently pick sort of thing.
Right.
And so we kind of decided to, you know, just have it be the one-off with Tim. And then originally No Sleep was supposed to be a one-off. But as I was like looking at the list, I was like, oh, I could immediately pick at least five albums that I really, really enjoy. So
yeah,
that kind of surprised me for like a label that, you know, kind of has the legendary status that it does in Drive-Thru to be like, I don't know, like I remember that label fondly, but I, you know, in looking at it, I was kind of like, it's really only a couple of bands that I really loved, you know, on Drive-Thru. And it would be multiple albums from each of those bands. So here we are doing No Sleep Records instead, which I'm kind of excited for.
Pure Noise.
See, I said it. Pure Noise Records. I would be curious now to look at No Sleep's library and be like, oh, see how many are on there. But Pure Noise Records. I was stoked because, like I said, there's a number of records that I really enjoy. So why don't you get into your first pick?
Yeah, and maybe we'll get to it later, some honorable mentions, because there's even more than these picks that you know we kind of agreed on. But yeah, so you mentioned no bragging rights, so let's kick it off with me yanking my headphones out of my ear and. Oh
I don't know if the people listening to the podcast will be able to pick up what just happened, but
sorry,
those watching on YouTube are now awake.
Oh, I hate that feeling too. Dang it! So was that like a loud sound or something?
Well, I mean, actually, I don't know if it came through your mic at all, like your actual recording mic, but it came through your Are you on your phone?
No, computer.
Okay, yeah, but I whatever mic it was coming through, I heard it.
Okay.
But anyway, no bragging
Sorry.
rights.
Oh my goodness. Yes, no bragging rights. And their album, The Concrete Flower, which was released on September 23rd, 2004. I had actually picked...
Whoa. 2014.
Oh, man, we're just full of screw-ups
5 years before
tonight.
the label was in existence.
My brain is fried now
That's
from blowing
fine.
my nose too much today.
You blew your nose. I was going to say you blew your brains out. No, you didn't.
No, just my nose, which sometimes feels worse than my brains because it's all in my face, just coming out of my orifices.
Yeah, you're not dead, are you?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Maybe
so
after this, but
September 23rd, 2014.
oh, yes, I had picked the album before this, Cycles, but then when I was going through the list, it said re-released on Pure Noise. So then I was talking to Mike, the singer from No Bragging Rights, and he had said how it was actually released on a different label, and then Pure Noise re-released it on the vinyl later, and so then I picked this album, which I equally love. So for this record, the band worked with heavyweight producer Will Putney, who had produced many of your favorite heavy records, but also has worked with bands like 4 Year Strong, so also works with kind of the punk side of things. Will really pushed the band to produce their best possible songs and to pay attention to small details. So I was able to get some of these notes from Mike himself, so it was cool to kind of get some inside info on this album. What was kind of more unique is that, so like I said, lead vocalist Mike, he gave the guitarist the lyrical themes for the record and then kind of asked him, here's the themes, kind of use that to inspire the writing. And then they kind of went back and forth and played off each other, which I thought was kind of a really neat idea. And so the lyrical theme that he'd given him was on the topic of anger and how it can either be used for positive change or, for a lot of negative things. So I thought that was a cool way to kind of portray that emotion and, just kind of work together more as, kind of a cohesive group. Because lots of times, the guitar player comes with the riffs or ideas or whatever, and then the vocalist just adds what he's going to add. So I thought that was a neat idea to do that. No Bragging Rights is, in my opinion, a very underrated hardcore band. While they've had lots of good tour opportunities, and they toured full-time for years, it seemed like they didn't quite reach the same popularity as some of their peers for whatever reason. But every time I go back and listen to them, I'm always like, man, this is so good. Like, I just want more people to hear this band. And so, yeah, I love their whole discography. I'm excited for what's to come with them. We talk a bit about that in my interview with Mike. And so, yeah, awesome band, really cool band to kind of start a record label too. So I was excited to hear that.
So this was my introduction to No Bragging Rights when you shared, that you'd interviewed Mike and then that this was on your list. I was like, they have one of those names that was either familiar to me because I had heard it or read it or what have you, or it was familiar to me because it's kind of like one of those classic hardcore names, No Bragging Rights.
Yeah.
But I almost put off recording this episode for one more week because I was listening just last night. I was watching some live footage of the band. And earlier on, I had kind of quickly put it on and was listening as I was kind of doing some other things or whatever. And but last night was the first I'd sort of sat down with it and really paid attention. And it wasn't even this record. It was just watching them perform live. And I was blown away by, I guess, just how they definitely have a unique sound to me. And maybe that's because I'm not overly familiar with all these different hardcore bands, and maybe they sound like 50 other hardcore bands. But in listening to this record and specifically their live stuff, I was really just appreciating how they reminded me of a mix. Again, this is based mainly on the live stuff, but of Hope's Fall, which I don't know if I heard that in listening to the albums itself. But in some of the stuff they're doing live, a mix between a Hope's Fall and then something that was a little more punk, hardcore punk versus that melodic hardcore sort of. Yeah. And I was really digging it. And so I almost put off recording this episode for another week because I wanted to spend more time actually listening to this record and give it, more chance, because I was like, I think there's something here that I will really enjoy. Unfortunately, I didn't quite get to that, and once I got my notes done, I was like, all right, let's go. We're ready to go. But
yeah, you can go back to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't even know, like, I feel like the live footage I was watching, I want to say it was from before this record.
Okay.
So I don't know. They may have played some songs off this for all I know, but like, as newer songs or whatever. But and I just love. I've been going on down a rabbit hole. Have you ever heard of? I think I've maybe shared it with you, but have you ever heard of LDB Fest?
Yeah, I went to it today and I watched a little bit of
Yeah.
a Knocked Loose set.
Yeah. And so just like watching, there's so many sets from like LDB Fest from last year that are on YouTube now, and they're really well produced. But just like watching the crowd go
Yeah, it's
absolutely
crazy.
insane. So if you've got time, I think I shared on our Twitter. Drain. I don't know if you ever listened to Drain, but they played a set and it was like 12 minutes in the
Wow.
middle of one of the songs, like right before a breakdown, he dedicates the breakdown to a pizzeria, and I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, no, I enjoyed what I heard of No Bragging Rights for sure. But the first record that I'm going to mention has kind of been mentioned twice here in a sense, at least the band has, and also because this one was also produced by Will Putney, I'm going to go with Knocked Loose, A Different Shade of Blue. And this is the second studio album by Knocked Loose, and it was released August 23rd, 2019. And like I said, produced by Will Putney. And here's the thing with this record. I was aware of Knocked Loose. I had heard of them, and I think I had checked them out a little bit, like their first record, and I was kind of like, yeah, okay. Like, I feel like they're one of the, as far as like when pop punk bands would talk about, like current day pop punk bands would talk about like hardcore bands, Knocked Loose was the one that kind of routinely would come up.
Yeah.
And so when I listened to their first album, I was kind of like, all right, whatever. And then this one, I kind of got on it a little bit after it came out, which is funny because so it says the album merges styles of hardcore punk and heavy metal. It blends in elements of Swedish death metal and groove metal, as well as melodic death metal, slam death metal, thrash metal, and black metal, all of which are genres that I have zero knowledge of, but Wikipedia has told me so. And this record, I want to say I must have just been in the right space or the right mood, which I don't know if that's a good thing, but like the first time I really listened to it, because it was one where I just like every song that would roll by, I would turn it up more and turn it up more, and I'd be like, yes, like. And I think because it's gnarly, but it's straightforward. It's obviously heavy and brutal, but it's also like catchy in a way. It's weird, and the second vocalist in this band sounds like Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget to me.
Nice.
In fact,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
his part in the song Misguided Son, which is the closer on this album, like literally made me pause and rewind and listen back to it because I'd never heard anything like it in music. And like I said, like in listing off all those different like subgenres of metal, I was like, I don't listen to metal. So, I mean, again, this could be something that's common, like his Dr. Claw kind of like growl type thing he's doing. But, no, the first time I really got into this band, it just hit me in the right place. And it's kind of the consistent, like, record I think that I go back to and I'm like, I just want to listen to something that I, like I can bang my head against a wall to, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
So, but, are you into Knocked Loose at all?
Yeah, it's one of those bands that I mean I've heard so much about. I've listened to podcasts with the singer. I think his name is Brian. Really, really interesting guy. I loved listening to him talk about the band, and I watched them live, and I think it's one of those bands that like I want to be into, but there's just not quite enough there to kind of grab me. It's a little maybe too dissonant or kind of chaotic for my liking, but I don't know. Yeah, there's something really cool about them. I'm actually surprised that they're on Pure Noise. They almost seem more of like a Bridge 9 or Death Wish
Right.
kind of band,
Yeah.
kind of a bit more kind of raw, thrashy style of hardcore metal.
I listed all the subgenres of metal. Do you need me to go over them again?
Yes, please. No. Yeah, so that's, I mean, it's cool because Pure Noise is, maybe a bit more current, a bit more modern for them. And I mean, they're a huge band. And again, like, it kind of surprises me sometimes. It reminds me of, I don't know if you ever listened to a band called This Is Hell from a number of years ago. They were a Bridge 9 band, I believe.
Okay.
And yeah, well, This Is Hell and Have Heart, like if those kind of bands where it was kind of melodic hardcore, but it was really raw and a bit more thrashy. But both of those bands, I just remember being like really big. and always just kind of thought like why do so many people like these? It's not really like catchy. It's not really like moshy. I know Knock Loose has some pretty crazy breakdowns.
Right. Yeah.
So, anyways, it's lots of really unique things about them. So it's cool to see a band that isn't like, you know, kind of your typical maybe popular looking band or sounding band that can be really popular and connect with lots of people.
I think you may have hit the nail on the head for what I like about this record, in terms of hardcore anyway, because like we've talked about, you know, different hardcore metalcore bands, and what label was it? Maybe it was Victory that we covered, and there was a band, maybe it was Gideon. Was that Victory Records?
That was Equal Vision.
Equal Vision. And I just remember talking about, you know, like the kind of more techie, like syncopated, like sort of stuff that was going on, which I liked, but it was just too much of it kind of gets me. Whereas like with this kind of thing, I think it just all feels so like loose and free flowing to me that like I have an easier time myself just kind of like getting on board with it, and like I said, turning it up as each song goes by. And I'm like, nope, it's still not loud enough. But sir, your ears are bleeding. Nope, it's still not there. Like, but yeah, no, I can appreciate it. And it's not like a chaos to me anyways that's like spazzy or anything like that. You know, like I think of some, like when I think of chaos in music, a lot of times I'll think of like some of those like spazcore sort of
like
things.
the Chariot or something.
Well, yeah, but like the Chariot I could get into. Maybe they just bordered it just enough. And I don't think Knocked Loose is as spazzy as the Chariot. Like they definitely have more heavy groove to them as opposed to just being, you know, like going kind of crazy. But that was
what genre was that you just
that was the genre of core. Not sure if you're familiar with it or not, but anyways, let's move on.
Now.
Yeah, you are now. What's your next pick?
Well, let's completely flip the genres here and talk about Hit the Lights and their album Summer Bones, which is their fourth full length. And it's their first, I believe, on Pure Noise. It was released on March 24th, 2015. Produced by Kyle Black. I mentioned him. I can't remember which album. I think it was who produced the Sleep on That record from Equal Vision. So also, I mean, he's worked with lots of bands like Newfound Glory, All Time Low, State Champs. So Hit the Lights, I feel like I didn't really get into them a whole lot before this. I'd kind of heard them. They were kind of always like kind of one of those maybe more subpar pop punk bands, or maybe that's, I don't mean that as an insult, but just kind of maybe like the more middle tier one that I didn't pay a lot of attention to. But when this one came out, I can still remember listening to it biking to work. And just being like, oh man, like this is like so much better than I remember them sounding, or, you know, they just stepped it up for whatever reason. And I've gone back to this album a lot of times. The singer Nick has a new project called Thief Club, which I also really enjoy. Yeah. And so it's been cool to see him progress in music. Yeah, I don't think Hit the Lights is still a band. I'm assuming not if he started something else. But yeah, just a really solid kind of pop punk album that has, you know, a lot more to it, I think, than, you know, kind of a typical pop punk album. And so it's been a fun one to go back to lots.
Yeah, so Hit the Lights for me are a band that, so the only album of theirs that I was ever really into is Skip School, Start Fights.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that was like 2 before this one, maybe?
Yeah,
it was a couple of while. Yeah. And it's interesting because, they're a band, I think I read they started in like 2003. So they had been around for a while. Yeah. And I want to say I discovered Hit the Lights on like Bandcamp, or maybe it still exists, but there's a website where artists could upload like music and you could just download it for free or whatever.
Pure Volume.
No, it wasn't that. Yeah. It was another one though that was like, and it would kind of like randomly like take you through things. I wish I could remember what it was called. But anyway, it was through like one of those sites where I would just like scroll forever to find, because most of it was crap, right? But I just scroll for a while to find something that I liked. Yeah. And Hit the Lights was one that I definitely liked. And I mean, they're from that era of pop punk where I wasn't big into it, you know, like there's a few of like the neon pop punk bands that I did get into. Yeah. And then there's like the whole like Fall Out Boy, you know, knockoff side of pop punk. And I don't think they necessarily fit either of those. Like with the artwork for Skip School, Start Fights.
Little neonish, but
it's definitely neonish and bright. But I feel like, yeah, they definitely clung to like something a little different from that time. But yeah, no, they're an interesting band, and they're always one that I kind of think fondly back, or like think on fondly a little bit, because they were just one of those bands that I sort of discovered when I wasn't into pop punk, like when I kind of like distanced a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty rad. I guess a pick I'm gonna go with. Okay, this one's gonna get me some flack, I think, by picking this one, but I'm gonna go with the story so far, Proper Dose. The reason I say it's gonna give me some flack is because listeners are probably like, why that Story So Far album? But hey, it's where we are. It was released September 21st, 2018, which was, we've talked about 2018 a little bit, about how I think it was such a good year. Like those singers like Trash Boat and stuff like that. But, like I said, I'll probably catch flack because people would say, well, there's so many other Story So Far records that were like probably within the scene itself more influential or iconic or well received or what have you. But I don't think I need to talk about this one too much because I have talked about it, and we even covered it a little bit when talking about Hopeless Records. And just like, I love the shift in sound, and this album, like I play it so much, especially like on our trip where we drove across the country. I don't know how many times I listened to this album on that trip, and it's just like, I mean, I know some of the songs are like literally singing about struggling with like addiction, but the whole record to me just like feels good and light and airy, and I don't know, I really love listening to it. I love the flow of this record. I can put it on anytime and go through it, whereas for myself I can't necessarily say that about other Story So Far records. I definitely have to be more in a mood, I suppose you could say. But yeah, Proper Dose, man, like I'll put it on whenever. I thought about bringing down, because some of these records I do have like on vinyl. I thought,
That'd be cool.
Throwing them up on the wall, but I didn't. I forgot. So anyway, but I know that you're familiar with the Story So Far, and we've talked about them a little bit. So unless you got some kind of crazy revelation you want to share about them, we can probably move into your next pick.
Well, I was just gonna say I've said a number of times how I'm not huge on bands kind of shifting sound, but this is one that I do like. There's a few that come to mind. Where there's Newfound Glory, Coming Home, 4 Years Strong in Any Way, Shape, or Form. Kind of with all those bands, it's maybe their third, fourth, or even Newfound Glory. I'm not sure how many releases they had, but it's a little further in. They've released, really solid albums up until then. So all their kind of hardcore fans have that. So I think they kind of get to this point where they want to, release something different for whatever reason. And this one I really like, as well as those other ones I mentioned. There's still enough of who the Story so far is to, it's not so unfamiliar that it throws you off. But there's definitely a bit different, like you said, a bit more maybe depth of songs or lyrics or just emotion to it. And definitely a record I can get into for sure.
Well, and you know what they say about emotion?
Yes, I know 3 things about it.
It's my middle name. What's up? What's next on your list?
All right, let's switch it back to heavy here with Counterparts and their album Nothing Left to Love. So this is their 6th studio album. So they put out quite a few already. It was released on Pure Noise in the States and then New Damage in Canada. The record remarks the return of guitarist and backing vocalist Alex Ree. This album was the band's first to break into the top 100 of the Billboard 200, so that's pretty cool for a hardcore band.
Yeah.
I've known of Counterparts since they were a local band. They started opening up for the band I was playing in Ontario back in 2006, 7, 8, kind of in there. One of the reasons why I remember them is because every time their drummer would pack up his drums, he would take the skins off and put like the smaller drum into the bigger one, and fit them all into like the kick drum. And I just always remember like wondering like, why is he doing that? It seems like so much work. But I didn't really remember them kind of standing out as much then. Back then you're seeing so many local bands that often you kind of just blur it out. But then when I got their first album, Prophets, I just remember thinking like, this is insane. Like, this is so stinking good. I kind of was annoyed that I had kind of hadn't paid more attention to them, but I mean, you don't know those things back then. So, they put out 6 albums. Every one is super solid. They're one of the best bands at what they do. I think they blend aggression and melody so well, without utilizing much clean singing. I'm not even sure if they have any at all. But this newest album, of theirs proves that they deserve any recognition that they get. Is this album is not only such a banger from start to finish, but it also carries some kind of cool weight to it. The songs are memorable, creative, and cohesive. I love anytime I remember to go back and listen to this band because it just reminds me how much I love them. They're amazing live too, one of my favorite live bands. So that definitely adds to how much I love them.
I don't know if I knew they were Canadian.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. And I wonder, do you know if they got their name from an Alexis on Fire song?
There could be a good chance that I don't know that for sure.
I mean,
but
not that Alexis on Fire doesn't have a song, as far as I know, called Counterparts, but on their first record, they did have a song called Counterparts and Number Them.
Oh, yeah.
So every time I hear Counterparts, that's where my brain goes.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to ask them about that.
I'd be interested because it's kind of cool. And I mean, they're a band that besides not knowing that they're Canadian, I've been aware of them for quite a number of years, probably because, like you said, maybe I originally heard their name back in those days when Means was touring and whatever, and just kind of as one of those names that circulated around friends, going to shows and stuff like that. But that's pretty rad that they're still going, and that they're doing better than ever, as you'd say. So that's pretty awesome. My next pick is going to be one that's completely, I didn't realize, and I mean, I guess I could say this for the most part about all these releases, but had no clue that this was on Pure Noise Records, because I think I heard, I for sure familiarized myself with the band long before I knew what Pure Noise was. The band is Gates, and the album is Parallel Lives, and it's released in 2016. It's their second full length from New Jersey post-rock, post-hardcore band Gates, and I remember when this record came out, really enjoying it. It's fairly mellow, I guess. I don't know if you put this one on or had a chance to, but I first heard this band while binge watching Audio Tree sessions on YouTube. In fact, they've got 2 sessions, which are both equally phenomenal. But I remember when this record came out, just being feeling like they kind of taken a little bit of a different direction, got a little bit airier, a little bit more ambient sort of thing in their sound. They always had that, but it felt like the Parallel Lives just expanded that even more, which was something I always look for. I shouldn't say always look for, but I love finding bands like that, because I've had this discussion with people before that I love the genre of post rock, but I hate the fact that most of the bands don't have vocals. It's usually instrumental, which can be fine, but I'm at some point I just want this band to sing. And then it seems like a lot of the ones that choose to sing, it's usually just screaming or something, and I'm you're not actually adding what I am hoping for here. Whereas a band like Gates, or even a band like Moving Mountains, who I've discussed as one of my, releasing one of my favorite records ever, it's so good. And the song Shiver on this album, Parallel Lives, stuck with me from the moment I heard it. First time I would have heard it was on this Audio Tree session. And it's got this instrumental bridge / kind of a guitar solo. He's basically just playing this very simple riff, but he's using a pedal while he's doing it. That's kind of pitch shifting it as he goes through the riff.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it sounds so awesome. But so when this was the record that made me, when looking at the list really of Pure Noise releases, and I was like, what? This is on Pure Noise? I want to do an episode, because this band, awesome. This band is one that I don't talk about very often, and I don't even listen to them a ton, because they're one of those bands where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'll be like, oh yeah, Gates, I should put that record on. It's not one that I always go to. And we kind of talked about that a little bit with Tiny Moving Parts, where for a while they were that band where I'd be like, oh yeah, I should put that record on. And then eventually they just kind of become, part of your regulars. But Gates is that band right now where every time I put it on, I'm this album is so flipping good.
Yeah.
So did you like it at all? Because I'd be very surprised if you did.
Yeah, you know what? I was not familiar with this band other than your list here.
Yeah.
So I put it on today at work, and I actually really enjoyed it for kind of having it as background music at work. It also really reminded me of late night drives, whether it was touring or something like that. It's just something, it's maybe has some elements of maybe like kind of Jimmy Eat World.
Sure.
Not as, mainstream sounding, but just kind of the overall sound to it. And yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. Like, it's not necessarily one I'll go back and listen to, but I'm glad I listened to it today, and it fit for the time.
Well, and I think like by saying something like late night drives or background music even, which is funny to like say about music. It's like, oh, it's really good background music.
Well, that's not an insult. It's just...
No, I know. And I just wonder, like, as like if a songwriter hears that, if they're like, oh, but I know exactly what you're saying, because they're a band that usually when I put them on, it's because I'm looking for something that's a little more laid back or a little more, if I'm working on something and I don't want it to be too distracting, or, like the late night drive sort of thing. It definitely has a specific kind of mood and feel to it. And it's one that I've loved for years. But let's get into your next pick.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess I should clarify, specifically for me, it's good background music, or like it's not the kind of release I'm going to sit down and be like, all right, like let's do this, right? It's like, okay, I want to still listen to this, but I'm going to be doing something else because it's just, for me personally.
Yeah. And that's actually what I think about most podcasts. But with like music like this, if I'm sitting down with the intent to listen to it, it's a lot of times it's the kind of music where I'm like, okay, what's all going on, and being able to kind of like, because it's presented in such like a non in your face aggressive, because like you can make an argument, the same sort of argument about, a lot of like more technical or like metalcore or even whatever bands where it's like sitting down and listening, like, okay, what's all going on here? But the nice thing is, I find with music like this is it allows space where you can like really more so absorb it than just be like, oh, that's happening. You know what I mean? So it definitely kind of creates, I think, something that for me that I love just being able to sit down and just like listen to and relax, drink a coffee, whatever. Let's move on to your next pick.
Yeah, so we're going to go with Masked Intruder. The album 3 came out March 1st, 2019. I'm not sure if it was this one that you and Jordan talked about, where he thought it was going to be modern baseball or something, but there was just something where... Oh, no, maybe it was Millencolin. Sorry, I think it was Millencolin.
I think it was Millencolin.
Yeah, right.
We may have talked about this, though.
Well, there was at least one Masked Intruder, because I remember like messaging you being like, hey, this album's really cool, you guys should talk about it or whatever. And so I haven't necessarily been following this band from the beginning, but I do remember seeing the name, seeing their album art, being intrigued, kind of wondering like, okay, is this just like a kind of just a goofy band or whatever, which they are. I mean, they have this whole kind of shtick where they wear masks and they sing about, running from the cops and committing crimes and whatever. But it's just so stinking catchy. Like it's really well done. I was listening to one of their albums today. I can't remember which one it was, one of the earlier ones, but I mean, just it's got really smooth production on it. It almost kind of reminds me of more modern kind of Ramones or something. Like it's fairly simple song structures. It's kind of like Ramones meets the Beach Boys, like just the melodies and the harmonies.
No, hold on. The Ramones were the Ramones meet the Beach Boys. That's all they were doing. They were just creating
there you go.
50s rock and roll, basically, like the early Beach Boys, early 60s rock and roll.
Yeah. I guess maybe I just didn't hear the Ramones doing like kind of like the doo-wop
they're there
stuff.
Yeah, okay. They're there.
Maybe I just don't know my Ramones as much.
That's fair, but I was going to say the same thing about Masked Intruder, though, is that I was looking to see if they're listed as like a Ramones core band on their, the all-telling source of information that is Wikipedia, but they're just listed as punk rock, pop punk, and power pop. So, but I would 100% agree with you, that they definitely have that Ramones vibe going on without being a Ramones knockoff band.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound, like the Huntingtons kind of where it's like, okay, these guys are definitely influenced by the Ramones.
Yeah.
It has some of that sound in it, but it definitely
like,
more modern.
Like along the lines more of like a Screeching Weasel sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, yeah, I was looking at, like, I've listened to this record. I just don't, maybe we talked about it because, like, looking at the time frame of when their records came out, it would have been this one if we talked about it, 2019. Or were you on the show by then? I can't remember.
Yeah, well, this is March, so it's beginning of the year. I might have started just
I think you would have been
that.
on the show. Yeah, maybe. I was going to
can't
say, that
remember.
was the year you definitely started, you became the regular. But yeah, because if we talked about any other Masked Intruder album, it wouldn't have been the one prior because that was 2014. But that does actually kind of like solidify something because I was surprised this was on Pure Noise Records, like you said, because I felt like, I was like, oh, they sound like they should be more of like on, I was going to say Fat Records, which their record previous to that was on Fat Records. So just as like more of a traditional like 90s punk rock band sort of thing, right? But yeah, so that's pretty cool. Pretty rad that it was on Pure Noise, though. Or as they've said multiple times, no sleep. My pick, my next one is one of the newest. I don't know if it is the newest to make the list, but it is definitely one of them, and that's Spanish Love Songs, Brave Faces, Everyone. This is their third studio album. It was released February 7th, 2020 on Pure Noise, and it was greeted with wide, I like this, this is what Wikipedia says. Album was greeted with widespread acclaim by music critics with a weighted score of 86 on review aggregator website Metacritic. Thank you.
Nice.
I can't lie. The first time I heard Spanish Love Songs, it would have been their record before. So this says it's their third, right? Third.
Yeah.
So their second album was the first time I heard them. And my immediate reaction to them was, oh, they're just a Wonder Years knockoff band. Everything from the way they sounded, I thought his vocals sounded an awful lot like Dan Campbell, and lyrically he was kind of writing, you know, just as raw and sort of real as Dan Campbell. And so I was just like, oh yeah, it's just, you know, it's just the Wonder Years Part 2. And then this record came out, and I think it solidified this band for me as like a standalone, like, no, these guys stand on their own. They're legit. They write fantastic songs, and there's no arguing against that. And it was actually one of my favorite albums. It made I'm trying to think if it made my top 5. It may have come in at number 5, or it was just outside my top 5.
Yeah, definitely sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was up there. Yeah, so Spanish Love Songs, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, this one's making my list, no doubt about it. But did you get a chance to listen to this record at all?
Well, I listened to this when it came out because you were hyping them up, and so I checked them out, and yeah, there's definitely elements to them that I can enjoy. Overall, it's not something that does a lot for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot to take away from it, and when I listen to it, I can understand, you know, why people like it. I don't put it on and be like, man, like, why would anybody listen to this, right? Like, there's a lot to like there, just not enough for me personally to really get into it.
Yeah, they're definitely a band that I think would have taken me longer to get into if I didn't find their lyrics so intriguing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's writing about stuff that I've never really experienced or dealt with, but it's just the rawness of the words and like the fact that he's not like, there's no, and nothing against, you know, using metaphor or anything like that in songs. Sometimes that can be incredible, but I tend to be more drawn to lyricists who are just like, this is the way it is, right? And this is what's happening and how I feel, and write it out. But still, instead of it just sounding like, you know, they're reading directly from their journal or something, it still sounds very poetic, right?
Yeah.
And this band definitely does that. I would also say, you know, if someone says they don't like them, I'm not necessarily surprised in the sense that, and I don't want this to come off in a bad way, but he definitely sounds a lot of times like he's crying when he's singing, which can get a little annoying. Like there's just parts where it's like,
yeah,
he just kind of lets it all out, and you're like, okay, like it's fine too. Like, but I could see someone being like, I don't know, I just can't get into the vocals. I'm like, that's fine. So why don't we get into your final pick?
Right. Oh, that's funny. I'm gonna have to go back and listen, and just maybe I'll just cry along with it. Maybe then it'll really impact me.
That's the point, man. You're just supposed to cry along. So if you need a good cry.
This wouldn't that be a sweet marketing ploy? This is meant to be listened to while you're just bawling. So
music to cry to.
Yeah. No, there's probably a lot of that out there. Celine Dion, et cetera, et cetera.
I like that you went that direction, and I totally was just thinking like, dude, I grew up on a lot of it. It's called emo.
Celine Dion started emo, man.
Yeah.
All right. Anyways, enough of that. But since she's Canadian, let's.
Anyway, sorry.
That's the Little Mermaid you're thinking of.
Nope, definitely
Just
not.
kidding.
All
Okay,
right, get on with it.
back to Canada and Celine Dion. So one of the influences from Celine Dion, a band called Seaway. Just kidding. Well, not about Seaway, but yeah. So their album Big Vibe, released October 16, 2020. This did make my top 10, I believe. And like I mentioned on that episode, caught me off guard. Not in a bad way. I mean, I didn't mind Seaway before that. I'd seen them live. They were good. I think they kind of, like I had mentioned, maybe with Hit the Lights, one of those bands that, not great, not terrible, just kind of hit the middle for me for whatever reason.
Right.
But this album just, knocked it out of the park for me. Just, I don't know if it's the kind of the 90s influence on it, or, I mean, lots of their stuff before was super catchy as this is. So, it's kind of even hard to pinpoint it, but just for whatever reason, I put this album on and just immediately was like, okay, I think they've convinced me to like them again as a band. And so,
sure.
which excited me. I've listened to this album a lot of times. Again, anytime I don't know what to listen to, I put this on and it's like, oh man, this is such a good album to go back to again.
Yeah, Seaway is, I would say, I mean, before the pandemic hit, it was our annual show that we would go to, because they would do a tour pretty much every year that would come through here, and they'd bring along other cool bands with them. And the first time I saw, I remember hearing them, and then I went and saw, they opened for Neck Deep, and I think I've told the story about this show. I went to that show mainly for Speak Low If You Speak Love, who is a Pure Noise artist that they get an honorable mention. But Seaway at the time, I was like, I kind of like them, but I don't know what to think about them. I'm not sure where I fall with them. And then when I saw them, I was like, oh, I get it. They're just like a party, have fun band, right?
Yeah, which is maybe why it didn't stick with me. But.
Yeah, their live shows are just so much fun. And so we would kind of start regularly going. And for me, my pick, if I were to pick a Seaway album, would actually be Vacation, because it's the one, it gets the most plays. My kids actually really like it. My wife really likes it. So it's just one that my wife will be like, can you put Seaway on? Okay. Why not?
That's awesome.
Most of that for my kids is centered around the song Lula on the Beach.
Oh, yeah.
But, and it was at that point too, I was like, oh wait, they're turning into Weezer on that record. Lula on the Beach, especially when you see it live and there's the big ending. I'm like, this is a Weezer song. Wait a second. And so to kind of start hearing their different angles, especially because early on for me, I was like, yeah, they're a straight up pop punk band, and it's just whether or not you like them, right? And then with Vacation, they started losing some of that straight up pop punk and bringing in more of those 90s alternative influences. And then with Big Vibe, I think they really fell into that, and man, they write some catchy songs. As soon as you say Big Vibe, the chorus of Big Vibe is stuck in my head. Yeah. And then for me, I'm from there, because my name is David, my head automatically goes to the song Mrs. David, right? And it's just they're so catchy and they're so good that every year when they would come, we would 100% buy tickets, not even a second thought. I was I don't even care who's coming, because I know they're going to bring a cool band. Last time they came, they brought Youth Fountain. Yeah. Which they had a new record out at that time too. It was really good. Yep. And so went to that show. It was fantastic. And one of the other ones they went to, they came and we went to, actually leads me to my final pick. It was the band Bearings, and my final pick is Blue in the Dark, which was their first full length, released in 2018. And it's a record that blends pop punk. I struggle calling them a pop punk band, really. I don't know if they play one punk beat, but definitely have a little bit of influence, pop rock, emo sort of stuff. They fall into the scene without, they're definitely not one of the ones that's going to open up the pit sort of thing, right? Yeah. But yeah, I saw them with Seaway before this record came out, and I fell in love with their sound. At the time, they just had an EP out. And I thought their lead singer looked like Justin Trudeau, which I thought was funny. They had similar hair anyway. And a fun fact about Bearings is that they're one of only two bands that I own multiple pieces of merch from, multiple T-shirts from. sad to say, neither of them really fit anymore, though. I still wear one of them because it somewhat fits. But the only other band that I own more than one T-shirt from, can you guess who it is?
Godzilla versus Kong.
Nope. That's A, not a band, and B, I only own this T-shirt. Hello. No, come on. I'll give you one hint. I have mentioned them in this episode.
Oh, man.
Not as a pure noise artist, though.
Can't put me on the spot like that. As soon as you say it, I'll know it. Go for it.
Years.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Bearings, this record came out, and I just remember being like, because I wasn't, and I mentioned this because they made my top 10 last year. I think they just snuck in. And
yeah.
I mentioned this because it was something similar in that I didn't really like the first 2 singles or whatever that they released before this record came out. And then the record came out, and I listened to it, and those singles fit into where they were on the record so much better as like just a piece of something.
Yeah.
And it was so good. The only complaint I had about the record was I wish they I think it's like the second last song, I wish is what they ended with, because it kind of has a really good finish, and then it goes into this acoustic song. And I was like, I'd really like to end on this like big like sort of song. But this record, I don't know what it does, man. It's like, I think this song called Blue in the Dark? I want to say that's where the title comes from. I just can't remember if that's actually the name of the song. But it does this really weird thing where like the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, this band is giving me all sorts of nostalgic feelings without, it's called Blue in the Dark, without actually like being a band that I, grew up on. There was just something in that song where it's like, they're capturing something that reminds me of growing up. This is really weird. So, but yeah, I know you like this record as well.
Yeah.
So you can share all of your crazy thoughts on it if you want.
Yeah, well, again, another one I got into because of you and Jordan really loving it, and it's one I've gone back to lots of times. I also enjoyed the new album. It's probably not like, if I'm in the mood for something like this, not necessarily the one I'm going to pick, but every time when I'm going through it and I see it, it's like, oh yeah, I got to add that again I've got to listen to this playlist just for albums that it's like, oh yeah, I need to listen to this again, and I'll always put it back on there. There's lots of... Is that Blue in the Dark, or is that Hello It's You that you're talking about?
Blue in the Dark.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I haven't gone back to the new one as many times, but
yeah,
still
it's actually been a bit. I don't know if I listened to this record in preparation for this episode, which is funny. So it's been a bit since I listened to it, but for a time there, it was one that would regularly get played, and I'll probably go listen to it tonight now that like we've talked about it, because it's been a little bit. But yeah, man, it's such a good record. Cool that they're Canadian guys, which this episode might feature the most Canadian bands.
Yeah, no kidding, man.
That's 3, I think. Seaway, Bearings,
and Celine Dion. Oh yeah, Counterparts. Yeah.
And Celine Dion. Woo!
She gets an honorable mention for influencing the most bands on this label.
Right. Speaking of, did you have any honorable mentions? I had mentioned Speak Low If You Speak Love. I thought about, I don't remember the name of the album now. Maybe it's Speak Low If You Speak Love. I don't know. It was the first full length, I think, that he put out, which he, of course, I can't remember his name right now, but he's the bass player from State Champs.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Does Speak Low If You Speak Love. And another one that I wanted to kind of shout out real quick was Corey Wells.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, does some great kind of acoustic stuff with just like a super raw voice. But
man, it's
not
so
raw
good.
in the sense that he can't he's off key and pitchy, but like raw, like it's.
He can push his vocals and
a
bit more gruff at times.
He'll let it go. He's pretty great.
Raspy. Yeah, well, I mean, the main one that I thought that we would mention would be 4 Years Strong. I mean, we've talked about Brain Pain a lot.
I told you, I said we're not going to talk about 4 Years Strong.
Yeah, actually, we've talked about them so many times already. But
yeah, I was going to say we've praised Brain Pain to no end, and then we've also done an episode. Did we do it? Or no, it was 4 Years Strong and some Set Your Goals, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think we covered any of the pure... Yeah, because I think they just have Brain Pain and then maybe Go Down in History, or the self-titled one and Go Down in History, I think, are on there. So that's the last. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Brain Pain would, probably be would be way up on my list. But yeah. Just thought we'd mention that so people are like, man, how could you not mention 4 Years Strong?
Because we've literally talked about them to no end.
Yeah, so
sure.
good.
And I think we've even brought them up in episodes that have nothing to do with them. So yeah, it is what it is.
We'll keep doing it. Yeah, lots of great releases on this label. You know, it was fun to go back and try to pick 5 because there was, you know, a number on the list that I could have put on there. And so yeah, just I don't know, they've got just such a unique roster. You know, between, you know, maybe not as many punk, but you know, the ones that they have, heavy hitters, and then the heavy, and then, you know, different ones like Corey Wells and the Speak Low that are a bit more, or like Gates, you know, a bit more kind of mid-tempo there. Or, just, I don't know, awesome label. I'm almost, like I said, kind of shocked when I go through it. It's like, man, how does the label get, you know,
in
all
such
these,
a short amount of time?
Yeah, such good bands.
No, good stuff. I think that'll wrap it up, though. So go follow us on our social media at Growing Punk Pod. You'll find us at growingpunkpod.com as well. Tell your friends about the show. But thanks for listening. You're our friends, so tell your friends. That's how it works, right?
And then come back and tell us.
And then come back and tell us that you told your
because
friends.
We're your friends.
Because we're your friends. Just a big circle of friends. Anyway, enough of that. Goodbye.
Yeah.